Okay, this is video lecture number 38. Today we are looking at abolitionism. 3 sections today. We're going to look at black social thought, including uplift, race equality, and rebellion, and then evangelical abolitionism, and finally the opposition and internal conflict that came from the abolition movement. So the moral crusade against slavery had its origins in the evangelical reforms of the Second Great Awakening. Given that each human being was understood to be a responsible moral agent in the eyes of God, abolitionists argued that the relationship of master and slave fundamentally violated Christian morality because the slave was deprived of the right to follow his or her conscience, and the master was tempted to assert himself in the place of God. Animated by the apocalyptic spirit of the age, abolitionists attacked slavery with a zeal that alarmed many Northerners and outraged most white Southerners. Even if they opposed slavery, most whites were so racist that they loathed the idea of elevating the status of blacks. So the abolitionists had their work cut out for them. In their eyes, slavery was not a problem confined to exotic corners of the nation. Its influence permeated national life, and all Americans had to confront it in order to restore the ideals of the Declaration of Independence. Southerners, of course, were neither convinced by the abolitionists' attacks nor willing to concede that the free labor system was less oppressive than slavery. So let's have a closer look then at abolitionism, starting with our first section centered around black social thought and social uplift. Leading African Americans in the North advocated policies of social uplift. They encouraged free blacks to elevate themselves through education, temperance, moral discipline, and hard work, and by securing respectability to assume a position of equality with the white citizenry. Some whites felt threatened by this, and in the mid-1820s led mob attacks against blacks. In 1829, David Walker justified slave rebellion, warning of a slave revolt if their freedom was delayed. In 1830, African American activists called a national convention in Philadelphia. The delegates did not endorse Walker's radical call for revolt, but instead made collective equality for all blacks their fundamental demand. This new generation of African American leaders focused on race equality rather than individual uplift and respectability. As Walker called for a violent black rebellion in Boston, Nat Turner staged a bloody revolt in Southampton County, Virginia. Turner, a slave, believed that he was chosen to carry Christ's burden of suffering in a race war. Turner's men killed 60 whites in 1831. He hoped other slaves would rally to his cause, but few did, and they were dispersed by a white militia. Vengeful whites then began to take the lives of blacks at random, and Turner was captured and eventually hanged. Now, shaken by Turner's rebellion, the Virginia legislature debated a bill for emancipation and colonization, but the bill was rejected, along with the possibility that Southern planters would eventually legislate an end to slavery. Southern states then toughened their slave codes and prohibited anyone from teaching a slave to read. So let's look at the next section then, which is evangelical abolitionism. A dedicated cadre of Northern and Midwestern evangelical whites launched a moral crusade to abolish slavery. William Lloyd Garrison, an abolitionist leader, founded The Liberator in 1831, and he also spearheaded the formation of the New England Anti-Slavery Society. Garrison condemned the American Colonization Society. He attacked the U.S. Constitution for its implicit acceptance of racial bondage and demanded the immediate abolition of slavery. In 1834, Theodore Dwight Weld who wrote the Bible Against Slavery, inspired a group of students at Lane Theological Seminary in Cincinnati to form an anti-slavery society. Weld and Angelina and Sarah Grimke provided the abolitionist movement with a mass of evidence in American Slavery as It Is, testimony of 1,000 witnesses. This book depicted the actual condition of slavery in the United States. In 1833, Weld, Garrison, and Arthur and Lewis Tappan, along with other delegates, established the American Anti-Slavery Society in Philadelphia. Women abolitionists quickly established their own organizations, such as the Philadelphia Female Anti-Slavery Society and the Anti-Slavery Conventions of American Women. The abolitionist leaders did a few things. They appealed to public opinion. They assisted blacks who fled from slavery via the Underground Railroad, and they sought support from legislators. Thousands of men and women were drawn to the abolitionist movement, including Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. Okay then, on to the last section, opposition. The abolitionist crusade won the wholehearted allegiance of only really a small minority of Americans. Northern opponents, there were opponents in the North, often turned to violence, and Southern whites reacted to it with fury, offering a reward for Garrison's kidnapping. In 1835, Andrew Jackson asked Congress to restrict the use of the males by abolitionist groups. Congress did not comply, but the House adopted the notorious gag rule that automatically tabled any legislation about slavery. Abolitionists were divided among themselves over issues of gender. Garrison not only broadened his reform agenda to include pacifism and abolition of prisons, but also to women's rights, when he demanded that the society emancipate women from their servile positions and make them equal with men. Garrison's opponents founded the American and Foreign Anti-Slavery Society. Some abolitionists turned to politics, establishing the Liberty Party and nominating James G. Birney for president in 1840. He won few votes. The very strength of abolitionism proved to be its undoing because its radical program aroused the hostility of a substantial majority of the white population. Okay, this does conclude our section over abolition, video lecture number 38. Please answer the review questions at the bottom and continue with your reading.